lessons to be learned from the microchip shortage. My guest is Bill Currence. He is president and managing partner of Cornerstone Consulting Organization. Hello, Bill.
Thanks a lot for having me on, and good to see you again.
Good to see you again as well. So as you know, many manufacturers today are in a dire situation with regard to obtaining adequate supplies of microchips and other components. So putting aside for a moment the factors that are beyond their control, what mistakes do you think they made that helped to put them in this situation in the first place?
Honestly, Robert, not too many, really. And the reason why is we've seen something. This goes back to a cornerstone, we call it fit operations, but there is external forces that sometimes the bear gets you. In this case, we had something unimaginable, a global pandemic. There's some companies that's now no longer exist that didn't have the right protocols. But even those companies that had the best protocols, this is a once in a 100, 200 year event that we have going on that affected everybody across the entire planet. So quite honestly, there were some very good companies still caught off guard because it was absolutely outside of their control as far as the reach and the overall this global magnitude of this event.
Well, there is a general consensus among a lot of experts and observers, Monday morning quarterbacks, maybe you could call them, that the just-in-time inventory strategies that were put into place over the recent decades to minimize inventory and save money in that way turned out to not be a good idea when your manufacturing line shuts down. Would you second that observation?
We first did the observation before we seconded it. At Cornerstone, we're very, very, very careful about. We have something called lions and tigers and bears, and certain industries need inventory to protect. It could be a hurricane, it could be something else like bad winter weather where trucks don't make it on the road. But we believe that you should have some body fat when you're a bear, like in Denali. Not everybody's a lion on the Serengeti. Now, sure, OEMs. Can actually get away with it a little bit more because all they're doing is assembling parts, but they still have to have enough what we call body fat or inventory. I absolutely think that this will change what I would consider lean fanaticism to some degree. I mean, one of the two things that's going to happen here is a little more body fat can make you healthier. Actually, at times you don't have to be at a 15 BMI all the time as an organization to be healthy. And the other thing that I think that we'll see changing is a lot more localization or resourcing back to the U.S. because of our dependency upon external forces or external countries like China and the ASEAN countries. So those two things, but absolutely, to be sure, this is something that lessons have to be learned about taking lean too far and taking just-in-time inventory too far.
Yeah. What about diversifying the supply base? Now, I know that in this case, it's a global problem, but in the past, we've had geographically specific disruptions and companies have been caught out because they had decided to source everything from that particular geography. Going forward, do you think that this in any way will cause companies to look to diversify their supplier base?
But if they don't, they're in trouble. The bottom line is they're in trouble. I mean, if you're going to get an electrification, which we're doing a lot, just met a CEO for a large box truck electrification company yesterday, and they're going to need help. If you're getting buying all your lithium from China, watch out, because A, it's a limited resource, and B, we know what happened when we had all the PPP, or the PPE stuff, mass and everything coming over from China, and then everything got hit. I would say that you need to have at least 2 or 3 good sources if you're going to go outside of the country. But if I'm a U.S. manufacturer or North America, I would be looking inside North America at either Mexico or Canada or inside the U.S. as part of a trade partner agreement. So you limit your supply chain and that risk. And also you have more options in case there's a geopolitical risk or something else happens in one of those regions. Absolutely.
Cost a lot more upfront. It requires longer term thinking on the part of executives in order to embrace that idea.
Well, honestly, the cost actually is not as much as you would think. And this is where I think that there's misinformation out there. If you set things up correctly, and in high industrialized countries, you have a lot more opportunity for automation. The only reason you go to low cost countries is to leverage a labor market. But now you can almost meet the exact same cost point through automation in high cost countries. the big concern there is fixed costs, fixed leveraging. So you need to make sure that you have a good market and you're going to hit on what your annual projections are so you don't wind up upside down or over levered by fixed costs.
Yeah. Another factor that is affecting manufacturers today is the human factor, and that is specifically the lack of humans or the lack of adequate humans to do jobs in the factories and the like. If you bring it back to the United States or back to Canada or Mexico, I wonder that could be a problem, especially given today's situation. Can't find enough people to staff these operations. So going forward, what hard decisions might companies have to make about workforces in order to anticipate that kind of development?
Well, Robert, on the short term, you're going to have to raise and we're seeing it. Companies are starting to come to the pump and raising their hourly rates or their salary.
Mm-hmm.
We see a lot of turnover, but it will begin to stabilize, even though we're still in flux. But quality of life is another thing too. I mean, Gen X and the baby boomers, our generations here are going to eventually retire, and you've got these millennials and these Gen Zers that, quite honestly, they demand a much more balanced quality of life. So employers have to switch the way they engage. However, what we're going to see is a period of inflation, just like in the last interview. So you have to also raise your prices. We'll have to get through this. It'll probably be a 3 to 5 year stint before supply actually comes back to meet demand. And then once we get to that point, I think we'll see a leveling off of the workforce. But the lessons to be learned here is don't get cut short. Don't wait too long to make those bold decisions to, raise your hourly rates to make sure that you stay in business, and then have the courage coming behind it to raise your prices, because guess what? We're seeing it going everywhere. And I got to commend Procter and Gamble and some of the other companies out there in the food and in the consumer industries that's doing that, because they're not going to get caught short. So what it really is just a new equilibrium point we're seeing, where everybody's wages are going up, but all the prices are going up. And so really it's almost the same thing. It's just everything's going to be a little more costly. Wages are going to be higher, but also, consumer goods is going to be higher.
And do you think that manufacturers will come to rely more heavily on automation? I mean, we're not talking about automation replacing all people in factories, obviously, but as a tool for dealing with workforce shortages, do you think it'll become a more popular option?
Robert, you're exactly right in that aspect. You have to delever yourself. And again, it's just the natural progression. As automation becomes more intelligent, it makes more sense to put those redundant or reoccurring jobs in through automation. A lot of times, folks will look at it as a cost benefit analysis where, the cost of capital isn't going to go up at the same rate as the cost of employees. So some of those business cases that they had before where it didn't quite make sense to automate 2 years ago, now today may make sense. So I think what we're going to see is a resurgence of that. And I think we're going to see a lot of growth in the tech industry and the automation industry over the next few years because of this.
So bottom line, we started out this conversation by talking about all the stuff that is not within the control of manufacturers today. But we got into talking about the things that are within their control. So there are things that manufacturers can do. I mean, the high points, as you say, a certain amount of automation, a certain amount of supplier diversification. So manufacturers have some tools, do you think, to kind of lessen the pain of the next disruption, do you think?
I think that they absolutely exist. I mean, we have a whole array of tools, and not just, at Cornerstone, but there's others out there. I think it's going to be a departure from some of the old sacred cows. The lean manufacturing, like we covered earlier, you have to have enough inventory to survive a small or a large crisis. That's within a company's control to say. It's just like, most people have an insurance policy on their house. Yes, it's extra money that you normally don't need to use, but when the time comes where your house goes up in flames, you have the insurance policy. Inventory in that matter has to be looked at external forces. So you control that. You also control your wage rates. You also control the pricing structure that you're going to present to your customer. And quite honestly, we're working with a lot of OEMs. They understand that prices are going to have to go up because of inflationary pressures. All that is within your control. So the main tenets that each company has is largely within their control. Even your supply chain, right? Like you said, diversification of supply chain. People and companies have to be able to realize that I need 2 or 3 different resources here. So in case something happens in one area, earthquake, or like what happened in Japan a few years ago, tsunami, I can overcome that by having secondary supply sources. So all those things are within a company's control. It's just, again, having the leadership and courage to execute on those things.
That is good to know in uncertain times. Bill Currence, Cornerstone Consulting. Good to talk to you on these topics. Thanks for your insights. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Robert. Thanks again. Bye.